All right. Sorry for the delay, y'all. The place where I was about to actually have the live stream was unfortunately taken. So, anyway, let me just share this and then we'll just get started. And y'all, if anybody's on right now, y'all can definitely go ahead and drop any questions that y'all have throughout the stream. And I will just go ahead and answer that. Probably late, Ted. Okay. All right. So, what's up, everyone? As I said, today I'm going to be talking about extroverted feeling and all the different facets behind extroverted feeling. And I feel like this is going to be one of those, pretty much one of those streams that will be extremely helpful to people because I think that what people don't seem to understand is that there are several different facets to a function. And because there are several different facets to a function. Oh, cool. And it's straight. Thanks, though. Since because there's like several different facets to a function, then at the end of the day, people don't really like they'll see one aspect and they'll hyper fixate on that aspect, maybe even like two or three, but they're not really seeing like the full picture. So what I want to do now in this series is pretty much like highlight the bigger picture of all of the facets of each function. So this one I'm going to be doing the extroverted feeling one, and then we're going to pretty much move on from there. And the way that I usually define extroverted feeling, or FE, harmony, is concerned with social dynamics, how we emotionally affect one another, and creating harmony by structuring society in a way that proactively meets people's needs. People with this function as a strength intuitively know the exact buttons to push in the exact order to get a desired emotional reaction from an individual or a group. They are also focused on weak points in interpersonal dynamics and will cause them as well as how to strengthen them. Extremely diplomatic, in tune with others' feelings, and makes decisions based on what is best for the group, putting his or her own personal feelings in the back seat or fuses them with the majority's feelings and values. People who use this function as a strength can often appear overly friendly, sometimes even spineless. So, all that being said, with extroverted feeling, we usually already see it as like, okay, one facet of extroverted feeling is that it's getting people's needs met. It's getting people's needs met. And it's like, yes, that's true. Like that's a facet of extroverted feeling. So if we have like an emerald of some sort, throughout all of these videos that I'm going to be doing, we're pretty much going to be talking about the different facets of each function. So if we have like an emerald or a crystal of some sort, then like these type of crystals, they have one face, they have another face, but the whole emerald is what we're trying to focus on. So we're going to be describing these different facets or these different faces on the crystal, the emerald itself. But the emerald itself is the function. So that's what we're going to be talking about over here. So extroverted feeling and its ability and its desire to get people's needs met is one facet. And that is also a legitimate facet. So this idea of people in a way who have extroverted feeling, like, they're anticipating what other people need, by the way. So I like that, I like that description in the sense that it's not getting people's wants met, it's getting people's needs met. So sometimes even what you want is not always what you need. And a mature extroverted feeling user will go against what you might want and still just give you what you might need. What's up, Jim? And so we have to keep that in mind, that it's not the soft spineless, function, at least not all the time. It can be walked over, but at the end of the day, it's paying attention to what you need, not just what you want. Now, a lot of times what we need is also aligned with what we want, and so it could seem off that way, it could seem that way, but in actuality, like, yeah, that's one of the things that FE, extroverted feeling, like, focuses on. But another facet that extroverted feeling focuses on is interpersonal labeling. That's what I would say. What I mean by that is that extroverted feeling does a great job at being, it's focused on the interpersonal dynamic. So it's focused on what's going on between this person and that person. It's focused on not even just these two, but then now, what if we put somebody else in the mix? And what about this person? What is going on between all these people? Like, when we talk about people reading, extroverted feeling is that function. It is literally people reading. It's looking at people and like, what's going on over here with their dynamic? What's going on in this way? What's going on that way? Like, that's what extroverted feeling is. So that's another facet of it. And when I say interpersonal labeling, I mean that. So the interpersonal is the line between people, right? So it's going to label that line. Oh, that man and that woman, they're married. So that interpersonal label is a marriage, a husband wife dynamic. That man and that girl, they are father daughter. Oh, teacher student. Oh, ex fiance and ex fiance. Oh, mistress and manager. Stuff like that. Like, it's identifying and it's paying attention and it's labeling all of these different dynamics, and it's focused and keyed in on that. And then from being able to focus on all of that and being able to label all of it, since it's always focused on what's going on between these people, not just these two people, but the more developed and the more advanced it gets, it's able to expand that over a group of people. Then it's now trying to decide, like, okay, how can we make this dynamic stronger? What is this dynamic missing? What are the things that's making it flawed? Even if it's a strong dynamic, how can we beef it up even more? So that is another component of extroverted feeling. It's always paying attention to the relationship, the interpersonal, and how can we beef it up. This is why you'll get a lot of FJ types who, when they're in a relationship, they're the ones who might be putting in a lot of effort, and they're trying to keep the boat afloat. They're trying to make sure that they don't let the fire burn out, because they are trying to make sure, like, everything is being done. Like, if there's a fire and there's like coal, like, they're the ones who, like, usually, not that other types can't do this, but extroverted feeling keeps its finger on the pulse of the relationship, and it's just really tapped in and tuned in to managing that. And then the more complex, the more matured the FE user is, the more of a territory that they're able to cover with that extroverted feeling function. So that is another function. That's another facet of the function. It's also another facet of it is, it makes decisions based on shared values. So essentially, when we're looking at someone, when we're looking at, like, maybe like a round table of some sort, like how that, like, knights usually might have it and everything, then in a sense, extroverted feeling is looking at, okay, these are, like, now that I have all of these people here at this table, let's hear them all out. Let's see what they have to say. And then, based off of democracy, based off of what seems to be, remember, it's getting people's needs met, but it's still tuned into, okay, what do they want? And let's see if we can make sure that what they want is also aligned with what they need. So it's paying attention to that part, that aspect. And then it's like, all right, this is what we're most likely going to do based off of what everybody was saying. And so I think that's a very big component of extroverted feeling. that it makes decisions based off of like shared values. Whereas, like, for example, like an FI user, they're doing the same thing but internally. So it's almost like they have a whole bunch of motivations inside themselves, and they're like, okay, I have this motivation, this motivation, this. So they have like a round table inside themselves, and then they're trying to decide like, okay, which of these motivations will win out over the other ones. They're all still me, but which one wins out? Whereas like for other people, it's like, okay, actually, for the extroverted feeling, it's like, okay, no, we're trying to pay attention to what wins out with everybody else. So that's one big thing there. Another one over here is focused on and is skilled in identifying and causing a desired emotional effect on a group or individual. So, like I said in the description, it's pretty much, if I want this to happen in a relationship, this is what I have to do to get there. It's focused on the dominoes of how to move things around, especially if it's an NFJ. Like, how do I move how do I move around like certain factors and implications so that I can get the desired emotional result or desired relationship from this dynamic. So that's that as well. It's also focused on rapport, establishing and building rapport. So extroverted feeling users, they are just naturally keyed in on, okay, if I nod my head, this is going to make the person, feel more comfortable. This is going to establish this type of rapport. They lock in on, once again, the interpersonal, whatever can beef up that interpersonal dynamic between the two or between everybody around them. That's what they're keyed in on. Now, a lot of extroverted feeling users, they might even be aware of this, but they might not act on it. But that doesn't mean that they're unaware of it. Like, it's something that they're always like, tapped into. Like IFJs, a lot of times they might be aware of it a lot, but they might not act on it, especially since, the SI or the NI, like if they're not familiar with the situation, if they're an ISFJ, then it's like, okay, I got to feel this out a little bit. And then the NI, it's like they're thinking through a lot of that, in the situations. And that's another there's another big thing over there. FE is also known to absorb other people's emotions. So that's another facet of the crystal. Am I saying that no other function, no other type absorbs people's emotions? Not necessarily. I guess not technically, but it's pretty uncommon. So FE will actively absorb and take on another person's emotions, and then in a sense, it's almost as if like FE has to actually leave the room before it's like, okay, that was that person's emotion. That wasn't mine, you know? But if it absorbs it, then it's like, whoa, okay, is this my emotion? Is this somebody else's emotion? Like, and sometimes it gets like tangled up in there, and then they have to use like TI in order to like sort it out. So the FE user, in absorbing other people's emotions and being able to identify them in that way, then that's where a lot of times they can become very, I don't want to say HSP, but I guess kind of like that, or empath. And once again, it's not that all FE users are empaths and other types cannot be, but rather that there's like just a natural tendency for the FE user because they're so keyed in on other people's emotional vibration in a way that they're like, okay, this person feels that way. Like, I know, speaking for myself, and this isn't like in a bragging way, but a lot of times, like I'll be able to feel how somebody else feels like. But then there's like another, like kind of like an ethic where if you have this ability, then the privacy behind it, like people don't like it when you're in their mind, you have to wait for them. You want to be invited to whatever that they're inviting you to. And so when it comes to FE in that sense, it's like, okay, I feel that this person is really sad right now. But I'm not about to be like, hey, I feel that you're really sad right now because I have these very super magical powers. Now, please tell me, what is troubling your soul? Like, that's really theatric, it's really dramatic, and it's actually really creepy. I'm not about to come at you like that. I feel like online, that's how they portray INFJs and stuff to be like. And, you know, if you're like that, I would think you have to work on your FE because that's not smooth, But it's more of like, oh, hey, is everything all right? Like check in. A lot of times they will lie to you. I'm like, oh, everything's fine. And it's like, are you sure you're okay? And not a lot, are you sure you're okay? But it's more of like are you sure? Because I don't know. I feel like you're probably like off. And if they still insist, and say, okay, well, just to let you know, my door is open. Um, if you ever need help or if you need someone to talk to, whatever it might be. So I think that's like a big thing with FE. Like it's able to tap in and key into people's emotional state in that sense, and it absorbs people's emotions in that sense. And because of that, sometimes FE also does not. uh, it's because FE is so, it's not really tuned in or paying attention to their own feelings a lot of times. Then what they will do is that, like I live, for example, with two FI users. So I live with an ISFP and an INTJ. And the way that pretty much what I realized, at least for myself, so speaking for myself, is that when I'm by myself, I don't feel anything. And I thought that was like really fascinating. But it's like when I'm by myself, I literally don't feel anything. One could say that I'm just in this very strong NITI headspace. Whereas when I'm with other people, that's when I'm feeling something because and that's why it's like such a riveting feeling for me because I like what I'm feeling when I'm with other people, when I'm connecting with other people in that sense. And so when I'm connecting with other people in that way, then essentially what's coming down, uh, huh, well that's interesting. Okay, I don't know. Maybe should I block that person? I don't know. Anyway, I'll see what's up. I have to plug this in anyway. That was a very interesting comment to just throw in here. But okay, I'll be right back. Okay, so yeah, I should probably just put user in timeout. That's cool for now. Anyway, so when it comes to FE with absorbing feelings and everything like that, that's pretty much like what it comes down to. Like, okay, I will that's what we were talking about. INTJ is ISFP. So when I'm by myself, I don't feel anything. I'm in this like very analytical headspace. Like I'll be washing the dishes, something, and I don't feel anything. But when I'm with people, then I'm really focused on what's going on between me and that person, and I'm enjoying that dynamic between me and the person. Um, and so for that reason, I try to engage with more people for that reason. It's almost like since I can't conjure up those feelings by myself, then I need something else to do that. That could be a playlist, So I have playlists for different kinds of moods that I might want to feel because it influences my emotional state. So if, for example, like I want to channel my sadness, then I'll go to a certain playlist. If I want to channel my anger, then I'll go to a certain playlist, stuff like that. If I want to put myself in a happier state of mind, I will go to a certain playlist in that way. So a lot of times an FE user can take on the emotion of even what music could be like, putting on. And once again, this is not exclusive to FE, but these are just general patterns. And when we absorb other people's feelings, once again, like the TI, a lot of times like, we have to use that to be able to like suss out and like, get through it. FE also looks for commonality. So one thing that I've also noticed about FE users is that they're usually very focused on what people have in common Whereas like with FI users, I see that they're focused on what they don't have in common, and both are beautiful. But yeah, you'll see that FE users are usually like the types of, whoa, me too, wow, like, and they're just like looking for like the me too's. Whereas like the FIs are like, wow, you're like this, that's awesome. I'm like this. Whoa, you're like that, that's so cool. But I'm like this. Um, and I don't know. I just found that to be like an interesting pattern that you could probably notice with like FE versus FI. This isn't the FI live stream, but I feel like you can't talk about one without talking about the other, kind of like distinguishing it in that way to an extent. So yeah, I've also already said that FE keeps a pulse on interpersonal needs, and I think that another facet is that FE builds substance in interpersonal dynamics. So once again, I think honestly, FE to me, the way that I see it is that FE is, sure, it's about getting people's needs met, but the biggest component of FE actually to me is intimacy. It's seeking to beef up an interpersonal relationship. It's looking at what's going on between me and this person, what's going on between that person and that person, and it's seeking to understand that dynamic and improve it. That's why FE is like, at least by Personality Hacker, it's like associated and nicknamed with harmony, because harmony is about getting everything on the same page. Sometimes, even if it's bad. So, an evil villain, an evil FE villain could get everybody on the same page to go and kill someone, like that's pretty much like what FE harmony can be like. But it's focused on, like, to me, I think that FE is mainly focused on intimacy and trying to build that intimacy. Like how, because once again, from my experience, FE users are often not paying attention to their own emotional experience. And so going back to the INTJ, ISFP, ENFJ dynamic, the ISFP, she said that her emotions are pretty much like if all of our emotions are like a well, then I'll start with this. She said with the INTJ, her water is like there, and it's like the INTJ said, like, yeah, it's kind of low, but it's there, and I can reach for it anytime I want because tertiary FI, whereas for the ISFP, she's like, yeah, mine is just always like overflowing, or it's just like always like accessible, and she could like just swim in it pretty much. Now for me as an ENFJ, if I were to relate it, then it would be that my emotions are always super, super, super low, to the point where it's always super low to the point where, hey, what's up? It's always super low to the point where it's kind of like it's kind of like I don't even know that there's water in the well. You know what I mean? So, especially when I'm by myself, but then when I'm with other people, all of a sudden I see like, oh, the water is rising, and that's what's bringing it up. So that's why I think that FE is like so much about like focused on beefing up the interpersonal dynamic, because that's when FE can actually feel something. So I think that's interesting. Whereas like with FI users that I've spoken to, that I've profiled, a lot of times it's not that they're not interested in interpersonal, but they don't need that in order to feel something for themselves, because they have a lot of emotions within themselves to explore and understand already. So they're always dissecting the emotions, the human emotions that are within them, and they don't need to bounce that off of someone or to have that engagement with someone in order to be able to dissect it. Whereas like with us as FE users, we are focused on the interpersonal, and we're focused on dissecting whatever's going on between me and you, or whatever's going on between you and you, or all of us, kind of thing. So yeah, there's that. I'm almost done with this list, guys. Uh, a desire / responsibility to create happy and pleasant experiences for others. So yeah, that's another thing. I feel like a lot of people view FE as pretty much wanting to focus on hey everyone, let's make everybody happy. And no, I'm not saying that there are not FE users out there that are like that, because I do know a few, and I'm not saying this to embarrass them or anything, but I think this is a big ESFJ thing. That's why they're really great with like throwing parties and everything like that. They know how to like up the mood in that way. But when it comes to like ENFJs, for example, I think that ENFJs, and I said this in a video on Joyce Meng's channel, where all the NJs, if you want to check that out, all the NJs were in one video, and we were discussing like how we think about stuff. Um, with ENFJs especially, I view them, or NFJs in general, I view them as they're looking for the baseline. Like, okay, what is each person's baseline mood? And I'm just trying to get them always to return back to that baseline mood. I'm not trying to amp up everyone's feelings. I'm just trying to get everyone to make sure that like at their baseline kind of thing. If anything, personally, me as an ENFJ, I get annoyed. Like, do I have the ability to hype up a room and all of that? Yes. Um, but I don't like doing that. I feel like it's fake, you know. Again, not to say anything about like the ESFJs that do that, because I actually see the reason for why they do it, especially at a party. It's like without that, like it's not. It's like like not everybody's not going to be able to like engage in a certain way. So sometimes you need the morale to be pumped up in that way. But yeah, I just feel like with like that's where NFJs versus SFJs like sometimes could like differ. And yeah, and that could go even deeper in like other ways. But yeah, like they have like a desire slash responsibility to create happy and pleasant experiences for others. They want once again people's needs to get met and all of that. And they like it usually when it's like a happy environment, because FE knows that if you are in a sour mood, then what's going on between us, or how you're going to influence everyone, is also going to be sour. So the best results will be if I can make you or influence you the best that I can to be at your baseline mood. That doesn't mean that I'm going to make you super elated and happy, but ooh, you're in like a sour mood. We have to at least cheer you up to your baseline, you know. So I think that's a big thing. Like it's not like trying to get you to be gleefully happy, but just trying to get you back to where you usually are. And that's different from for other people for different people. There are certain people that they are just the types like when they're at their baseline, they're like, oh hey, how you doing? Blah blah blah. And then there's people who are like when they're at their baseline, they're just chilling, and that's what it is. And that's another thing too. I feel like oh, I feel like a big thing about FE that people just don't really seem to understand is that it can be really, really composed. They're still judges, they're still FJ types. And so because they're judges, then just like every EJ, who's like very, professional, whatever, a lot of times they can come off very composed, put together, professional, you know, very composed, put together, professional, all of that. And a lot of people, like I see a lot of EJ characters mistyped online as IJs, just because like they're the classic, like, they're sitting down with their, and they're talking like this and all of that. And it's like, because I guess they expect like FE DOMs to be, like super excitable and like, hey, so what? And it's like, no, that's not the case. In fact, like, I think most FE DOMs are actually like really almost like intense. That's not to say, I think there's a spectrum. So there are the FE DOMs that are like, you get a car, you get a car, you get a car, like there's that. But I think that once again, spectrum. There are a lot of FE DOMs who are really composed. that a lot of people on the internet confuse them for introverts. I know FE DOMs, like who knew that they were FE DOM, and they said that other people tried to tell them that they were IFJs. I'm like, wow. It's like, yeah, no, because the FE DOM just doesn't fit their idea of what an FE DOM is supposed to look like. And it's like, we have to like really understand that. Like, for example, if you ever watch Big Hero 6, I think that the big brother in the movie at the beginning, Tadashi, I think that he's a great example of an ENFJ. And people online would probably type him as INFJ. But once again, you have to understand, like, the man is not an NI Dom. Like, you can't be an INFJ if you're not leading with NI, You have to be leading with NI in order to be an INFJ. But if you're leading with FE, then that means that you are either ENFJ or ESFJ. And that just because you're leading with FE does not mean that you're going to be bouncing off the walls. It doesn't mean that you're going to be this super gregarious person. If anything, it's literally just that, like being able to understand the interpersonal dynamics and being able to beef them up as you will. So I think that that's a really big thing that I've been hoping for people to understand, that like, be careful when you're typing people as IFJs, for example, because FE DOMs can also be very composed and seemingly introverted because there's different ways in how it shows up. Skilled in tact and grasping the social culture. So I feel like that doesn't really need like much explaining. Like FE is really great at being able to understand how to tell the TI truth that they have. So it's not necessarily like watering it down, but being able to understand that, okay, in order for this pill to be swallowed, my delivery of it has to be smooth. Now, the truth itself might hurt, but my delivery is not going to be what hurts. I think the FE is really good at that. So that's what I call tact. And FE is really good at being able to, when it's healthy, it's good at being able to create the environment and the space so that people can feel free to speak their TI truths. So when FETI is like integrated well, it's not, when FE is like unhealthy, then it's like, everybody, no, we don't talk about that. We don't talk about that. We don't talk about that, But when FETI is like integrated, then it's like, okay, no, we will talk about that, but we're going to set the space so that that can actually be brought up and nobody's feelings are getting hurt and it's being delivered in a tactful way so that we can just talk about the idea and we can talk about it like in a detached, logical form and nobody's being judged, etc. We're avoiding ad hominems and all this other stuff. So I think that's a big thing. FE often hides negative emotions so as not to burden others or affect the room. I think that's pretty known. That's a pretty known like FE thing. Like it's because FE users are so aware of how their emotions can influence the people around them, then they try to keep their emotions to themselves, which is interesting because you think like, oh, you're an extroverted feeler. That means you're just extroverted. You're extroverting your feeling. And it's like, not necessarily. If anything, sometimes the introverted feelers are the ones who are doing that because it's like, well, no, I feel like it's fake for me to hide how I feel. I need to express exactly how I feel or else it's inauthentic. Whereas like the FE users, it's not necessarily fake for them. It's just not as big. It's more important for them to not influence the people around them, especially in a negative way, than to be authentic in the sense that I have to express this. There's not, because again, they're not that tapped into the emotions to begin with, to be able to express or to feel this overwhelming desire to express in that sense. So FE takes the perspective of the many, which pretty much goes back to that whole round table situation that I was talking about. I really wish that guy wasn't there. Sorry, y'all. But yeah, so Fe takes on the perspective of the many. So again, it's just going back over to that round table thing. Like, okay, what is? It's almost like it's looking at social truth. If this is true for everybody socially, then that means that this is what we're going to kind of go with, because this is what everybody's like perspective is. So that therefore this is kind of like the shared reality that we have and we have to go off of. um, it's focused on interpersonal outcomes. So kind of like what I said before, like Fe is focused on like ever since Fe users were younger, they've focused on like, okay, I noticed that when mom, said this to dad, it made dad happy. I noticed that when my brother brought home this bad grade, it made mom very angry. I noticed that when dad did this to mom, it made her really sad. And so it goes from that basic level to expanding into how communities emotionally influence each other, and then how countries and even like whole societies do. Like Martin Luther King Jr. Day was just yesterday. I believe that he was also an ENFJ. Once again, a very composed ENFJ that most people are like, no, 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 he's INFJ. And it's like, no, if you really pay attention to this man's life, like even I'm reading through the book like Strength to Love. And oh yeah, for actually I have it right here. Yeah. So I'm reading through this book right now, Strength to Love by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And at the beginning, Coretta Scott King, his wife, is talking about how when Martin used to sit with his friends and everything, they would have like all these late night conversations and stuff. His friends made fun of him because he was seen as like impatient at times. Like they're just talking about all this stuff, and he's like, okay, but when are we gonna do something? And to me, that strikes me as obviously very like tertiary SE. Like, all right, no, we have to get into action. We have to get into action. And then he would laugh at them when they would tease him. He's like, yeah, because all we just keep on doing is this analysis paralysis. That's a very INJ thing, or very intuitive Dom thing, if anything. Like, yeah, let's just analyze this and like keep on analyzing this. Whereas like, the higher like your SE is in a way, and then like the more ready you are to like, let's stop analyzing, let's get into action, So yeah, but once again, like a very composed ENFJ, I believe. And he used FE to be able to understand how the societies impact each other, how we as a human race are impacting each other, and then how he can like influence that and better, humanity, and how, we all view each other in this way. Um, Last two, and then I'm going to get into questions. So yeah, it keeps a pulse on external and emotional experiences and impacts. So once again, like it's focused on the domino effect of interpersonal dynamics, and also like how emotions might play out. And then lastly, the last facet of extroverted feeling that at least I've listed is that it chameleons based on social expectation. So there's like a saying where it's like, don't be the person who's influenced by the room, influence the room. And I think that there's a time for everything. There's a time to influence the room, and then there's a time to be the one influenced by the room. And a wise FE user knows when to do both and how to do both. Because if everybody's just trying to influence, then you're not having harmony. Like you just have a whole bunch of people just trying to dominate. There's a time to lead, and then there's a time to follow. And sometimes we all have to learn to follow each other. Sometimes you have to learn how to lead, and you have to know when to do that. Don't do it from like a haughty spirit, but do it like when it's necessary. So sometimes FE does like chameleon. Once again, like might like go back into like hiding its feelings or whatever, that person's feelings, because they don't want to like influence. But also a lot of times it's like it's more of like FI users can see FE users sometimes as fake, when in actuality it's like, no, we're bringing out the side of ourselves that'll best match this dynamic. So everything that we're bringing out is still us, but it's like a chemist. It's like, okay, this is this person, what they bring to the dynamic. which side of myself should I throw into the concoction to create the dynamic that I want between us? Sometimes I might bring something different the next day. Sometimes I might bring more parts of myself to put into that concoction, but all of it is still myself. So none of it is fake. But I can strip out a part of it and throw it in there. Whereas, like, I've seen that with FI users, especially FI DOMs, like, at least according to what my wife says, and like some of the other ones that I know, there might be exceptions, but they seem to not really have as much of that handy, because for them it's like, no, I'm just too much already like myself in this sense, and I'm not going to just change all of that. So yeah, all that being said, that is extroverted feeling, I would say, in a nutshell, but in actuality, I think that's like in depth. These are the different facets of extroverted feeling that I feel like are very necessary for people to understand when it comes to the function, because I think that we oversimplify it. And that makes me really sad, especially as an ENFJ. It's like, it's not all about just like, I'm gonna get people's needs met, I'm just gonna keep on serving and serve. It's so much deeper than that. It's so much more rich than that. People call FE shallow, and it's like, well, no. It's broad in the sense that, like, yeah, it's managing a lot of emotional dynamics, and it doesn't get deep with its own personal feelings, but it is getting deep with understanding, like, what is this dynamic, what is that dynamic, like, how do I manage this? And like, it's always like observing that, it's always reading that, and it's always trying to figure out like how to influence that, how to like tighten the bolts of a relationship, how to ameliorate a relationship in that way. And once you have somebody who's always fixated on how to improve a relationship, how to sustain a relationship, that's a pretty powerful person. So, yeah. Looking at the comments now before we hop off. And like I said, I'm going to try to do like one of these for every function. So, y'all can just stay tuned on my channel. I'm glad that Mr. Nazi Party, Adolf Hitler, and Ku Klux Klan, KKK 666 has been blocked and is not here anymore. I don't know what that was. A troll, obviously, but wow, this makes me realize I could be very FE. That's really interesting. Yeah, Venus. So, what type do you identify as? I would like to know. Um, question here: do FI users do that too? Change the song to match the emotions more than the FE? So, great question, Jim. From what I have seen, no. Once again, I don't want to make anything like definite. These are all just patterns, generally speaking. But with the FI users that I've spoken to, they have their playlist where they separate it, sure, but they aren't influenced by the music, because it's almost like, like, these are my emotions. And I'm not going to let somebody impose or influence them, which is sometimes why they can get annoyed with FE. Like, FE, a lot of times, like, no, I don't mind, having my emotions influenced, like, that's kind of what we do here. But FI is like, this is mine. So if they're going to listen to a song, they're still separating their emotions. They're guarding them in this way. Whereas, like, for us, it's more of like TI in a way. It's like, okay, no, these are my thoughts. I don't care what you think. I'm going to hold on to what I think here. That's more for like higher stack TI users. But it's kind of like the same thing. Like with TI, FI, it's like, this is mine. I'm not going to be influenced in this way. You can't get to me. So in that sense, they won't really like change the song to influence their emotions. They might listen to a song that might match it, but even then, at least for my ISFP wife, she said that she's like, what? Why do you do that? Like, to her, it's weird, because she's like, I already have enough feelings to deal with. I don't need other people's help. And then the ESFP that I know, it's the same thing for him. He was like, yeah, I have enough feelings to analyze on my own. I don't need assistance. So I think that's a big thing there. As an FI user, I'm very self-aware in social interactions. What is FE picking up that I'm not picking up? Does FE jump to false conclusions based on SE? Great question. So, as an FI user, you said that you're self aware in social interactions. Okay, so what I'm seeing from that is like if you're saying that you're self aware, then what you're saying is like you're aware of how you are coming off in the social interaction. Like it's focused still on you, you know? Whereas like with FE, it's very focused on what's going on between you and the other person. So in that sense, FE is also self-aware, but it's also other aware. It's aware of like, okay, it's not just how am I throwing the bowling ball and making sure that my posture, I forgot the word, but making sure that my toss is whatever it is, but it's also how many pins have been knocked down. Like it's looking at the effect of what they're doing and then calibrating it to that extent. Does FE jump to false conclusions, especially like based on SE? FE definitely can jump to false conclusions. Like so if you have like an ESFJ, for example, and they haven't really like honed in on their SI on what's reliable, then they might have an FE and E like, oh, I saw that the neighbor was like they were arguing. I wonder if they were doing this, and they start like creating stories. Like they just start like conjuring a whole bunch of stuff up that could become the new gossip. When it's like, well, we don't really know that. With FESE, it's also like it could be like, oh, you're mad because you have this face and you're mad, or like it's just like making a judgment based off of that, and they might be like actually not even just like you're mad, but it's like, oh, you're mad because of this. And it's like, well, no. Let's take a little bit more time to understand and get into their perspective of why they might be mad and all of that. Maybe they are mad. You've identified that, but you haven't really gotten into like why. So I think that's how sometimes like FESE and then FENE can like jump into conclusions. But usually because they're so focused and tapped into how once again like people emotionally affect each other, a lot of like I feel like that's kind of uncommon when that happens because that's their superpower. Like they're really good at being able to identify like this is what the social culture is, this is what somebody's feeling, etc. Hi, Denzel. Wow, now I understand why I love FE so much. I really like when people actually like FE, So thank you, Phoenix, because I think that FE gets a lot of hate. Oh, FE is so overwhelming. And to me, it's like, do you understand that FE, because it's so aware of how it influences and affects other people, then a lot of times FE users can become like very self conscious about that. Like, if anything, we don't want to be overwhelming because we know how it's going to make you feel. So it's like, oh, and maybe it's me as a nine talking, but it's like the last thing that I want to be is overwhelming and overbearing. So instead, I'm going to try to like be careful in this sense. I'm going to try to like be careful, and I'm going to try to just keep from, being annoying and overwhelming and all of these things that people can usually like describe. Like FE for me, especially, is like as soon as I hear somebody doesn't like something, I'm like, oh, I'm writing that down. I'm keeping note of that because why would I do something that you don't like? That's going to influence you to maybe not like me. And that's going to sour the dynamic in some way. It's going to put a dent in the dynamic. I don't want to put a dent in the dynamic. So therefore, I'm not going to do that. So yeah, I love that you actually like FE. So you're saying ESFJs can be cringy sometimes. We are not here to type shame. Any type can be cringy sometimes. That's what I'm saying. But yes, there are times where an ESFJ can be cringy. Just like an ISFJ can be cringy, just like an ENFJ can be cringy, and ENFPs, ISTJs, yeah, all of that. But they are all cringy in their own different ways. I think my emotional baseline is very low. Like I just don't feel much for a supposed FI user. Okay, so Venus, you identify as an FI user. Interesting. Yeah, I really wonder what your so I wonder what your type is, and yeah, what is your baseline then? Do you think there's also difference in introverted and extroverted handwriting? I think I noticed extroverts are big and the introverts are small. Um, I have noticed something like this. Uh, I do believe that your handwriting says a lot about how you are. Um, Once again, maybe because I'm a nine, but my handwriting is actually very tiny. So I don't know if I have like an example here. Um, I'm writing notes all the time, so I feel like I should. Oh, yeah, I do. But yeah, I think that when it comes to handwriting, like yeah, like, this is how big like my handwriting can be at times. So I feel like it's not really like like that big. I have seen people who like when I think of like handwriting in that sense, I think of like ESFPs, like those like or even ESTPs sometimes who might like write like their name super big. But also, think about once again like FE. Not that only FE users can be considerate, but it's like you're trying to make sure that if you're thinking of like other people that have to sign this, then you're going to be thinking about like, oh, let me make sure to write small so that other people can sign this, or even like as a judger, you're like, well, I want to utilize as much space on this page as possible. So I wouldn't make that too much of a pattern, but it's something that could be investigated. Is he INFJ? If you are referring to me, then no, I'm an ENFJ. If the Americans, if the Americans a SA John S oh okay. If the Americans SJ dominant and Africans SP dominant countries, what do you think Japan is? I thought they were very SJ, but they could be NT. I think that Japan is actually very SJ from what I hear about their culture and how they, just they're really like a Japanologist friend of mine. Shout out to you, Jessica, if you're by any chance watching this. She said that she pretty much sees the culture of Japan as ISFJ like, maybe even ISTJ, but yeah, it seems very SJ in that nature. Sounds like FE gets its depth from TI. Pretty much, yeah. 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 Like, the introverted function will bring more depth to it. Um, yeah, I guess there's not really much more I can say to that. But yeah, like the more that you integrate your TI, then the more depth you'll present as a FE user. Venus, there we go. I identify as an INFP, but I'm beginning to think different. Also, the thing about, okay, but are we going to do something about it now? I think I relate to somewhat. Interesting. Well, not to self plug, but I'm a self plug. If you would like a profiling session with me, there are details in the description box. You can just email me at DEEZY, number two, blessed at iCloud.com, title it profiling session. And you can put like a dash Venus and I'll like expedite, yours since, you're here. And we can get that popping if you want. I should let you know up front. I charge $100 for a profiling session. You can pay that in installments, like 25 this week or 25 this month, whatever. I trust people. Or you can just pay it all up front. But it comes with, a recording. We go very much into detail, like, so it's like about 90-minute session on video chat where I identify what type that you are. So if you want that, if you're interested, I can definitely help you out in that way. But also, I have a video on INFJ versus INFP, so you might check that out. I have two videos on that actually. The second one and the part two, I actually interview an INFJ and an INFP. But also just know that you might not be either one. So especially if you're the okay, but are we going to do something about it type? That seems more extroverted in nature. So yeah. Hello, I've been watching you for a long time, but I have to disagree with you here. Oh no. No, I'm just kidding. That's cool. How can you claim to be independent if you're the same person who asked help from a minor to give you? What? I think this might be another troll because I swear on everything, I have no idea what they're talking about. Anyway, Venus rising TE on the OPS also seems to be very responsible for doing things logically, especially when, yeah, that's that's a very big thing. Like TE does have a like doing things logically, whatever type of feel to it. But I still think that even when it's an auxiliary function, it could be an analysis like paralysis because it's still like, in this very, if it's auxiliary, then you're either going to be an NI dominant or an SI dominant. And once again, if you're not really familiar with the situation that you're in, then you can overanalyze as an SI dominant. Or if you're not really having enough sensory information to be able to project what's going to happen to the future in the future, then that could also slow you down as an NI dom. So yeah. And it seems like the last question. Does it really make FE happy to make the loved ones happy? Absolutely. Once again, not exclusive to FE, but yes. When we see that we have influenced a loved one, especially anyone, to be honest, but especially like a loved one, and they're happy, then it's like their happiness has now influenced me because remember, my feeling is affected by them, the interpersonal. So it's like, oh, that has now just made me happy. And if I've hurt you and I've made you sad, that just now made me sad because I'm feeling whatever you're feeling, If so, when is it healthy and when is it codependence? Not generalized, but how can FI support FE when it comes to love? Oh, that's a great question to potentially end off on. Okay, so when is it healthy and when is it codependence? I think that it's codependence when the FE user is when they are doing it at their own expense. So I used to be the type of person that, and I'm still, actually, I'll say I'm still working on this, but FESE for me, like kind of like looping, if you will, would be the whole notion of as soon as a need pops up, like if somebody needs me or if there's a way that I can help someone, I'm going to just jump right into helping them. I'm just gonna like, hey, like this is like, oh, I have to do this right now. But I might be tired. You know what I mean? Like, and I didn't really like check in with myself. So I think that is I think that's like a big way on like how it could possibly become like codependence. Or if you mean codependence from like the other person, then yeah, that's where FE sometimes can enjoy that, and that's not good. Like it likes that other people are depending on them for something because that's, I guess, how they can like feel like relevant in your life. It's like, okay, you still need me to like do things. That's why you'll have like the mothers who are like, no, mother knows best. Mother knows best. Because it's like they want you to still need them. They want you to be codependent on them. They want you to feel like I know what's best for you. But when it's healthy, it's allowing you to make your mistakes. It's allowing you to have your own emotional experience. And it's not telling you what to do or what to feel, but it's just walking through that with you. And it's holding space for that with you. And I think that that's how FI can support FE when it comes to love. My ISFP wife, she helps me a lot with being able to sort out my own feelings. It's like, no, Denzel, you have to be able to understand that this is how this affected you, and yada yada. Yeah, you know what? I think that did affect me in this way. You're right. Like, because for me, like my feelings really have to make sense, and apparently it's because I'm an Aquarius moon. So honestly, that stuff really was crazy. But anyway, we're not going to get into the astrology talk right now. But yeah, I think that that's common for FE users as well, like the FETI dynamic. Like our feelings have to make sense to us. So for me, especially, I think you can say it's the Aquarius moon. You can say that it's the 9. You can say that it's because I'm an FE user, maybe all of the above. But when something happens to me or when I'm affected in a certain way, then I don't immediately feel something. It's more of a, what should I be feeling right now? What did they mean by this? And I'm trying to like, I'm doing all of this logic to figure out before I'm like, the end conclusion, like, that's what I should probably be feeling. And then I'll like put that out, maybe. But also, I guess as a 9, like I try to like not feel like a negative emotion. Like, oh, maybe that's what I should be feeling, but I don't feel like feeling that. So I'll just like kind of like let it go. I feel like FI helps you like own your feelings, and to like really be like, hey, this is your emotional experience and it's valid. It's like, yeah, you know what? My emotions are valid. You know what I'm saying? So yeah. Hopefully that answers your question. So, what is the next cognitive function you're going to talk about? I think I'm going to talk about FI next. Uh, yes, so that's what I'm going to talk about. I can't promise you a date yet. I'm going to try to make sure next time in advance that that room is open. Every single other time that I'm here, it's open, but all of a sudden it's not today. But this hasn't been too bad. Just a few people have kind of like walked by, so that's cool. But yeah, I'm gonna do introverted feeling next, and then after that, I might do introverted thinking, and then extroverted thinking, and then we'll go into the intuitive sensing functions. My crush appears to be ENFJ too. What can I do to please them and make them more comfortable talking to me? And how to get closer to ENFJ personally and not just socially? I have a video on my channel. I made it like in a documentary style. It's called How to Know If an ENFJ Likes You. I think that would be a very helpful video to you. But in essence, I think speaking personally as an ENFJ, the easiest way to like, I guess, make me comfortable and to please me is just be thought of. No, actually, nope, because I've met people who will think of me and then they still don't hit me up. So, so think of me and write me. Let me know that you're thinking of me. We don't even have to make it like a whole conversation, but just kind of like, hey, like I thought about you. Just wanted to make sure, like, are you doing all right? Yeah, actually, yeah, I'm doing great. Like, how are you doing? It's like, yeah, I'm doing great. Whatever. So, well, like, it's not like it's like small talk, but like, I just like to be thought of. And if I see that you're throwing logs into our fire, if you're throwing like firewood into the fire that we have, and it's not just me putting in the effort to keep this fire ablaze, then that's great. And for me to once again like feel comfortable, that would like ask me about how I feel or what I think about certain things and create a space for me where I can share and express without feeling like I'm going to be judged. I think that's the biggest thing, like, especially as a TI inferior type. I feel like people think that TI inferior means that you're just not smart. You're just not able to do logic. And I'll admit, I don't really like math. And I don't want to, no, I just can't, like it's, yeah. But I had like for me, TI inferior is more of like having very strong opinions, but being so aware of how those opinions can influence the dynamics around you that you hold it back. So you don't share that way. It's like you don't hurt somebody's feelings, or you don't hurt the dynamic between you two, or you don't hurt how the person might view you. But if I can trust that I can share this opinion and you're not gonna like judge me, you're not gonna, You're not going to be like, how the heck did you think that about whatever, whatever? But you're like, oh, interesting. Like, well, I disagree right now, but why do you think that? Like, okay, I still disagree, but I can see where you're coming from. Like, I understand your math. I understand your logic. To me, that makes me feel comfortable. So ask them how they're doing, and to know about how are you really doing. Hey, I wanted to know, what are your thoughts on this? And if you see them giving like a shallow answer, it's like, okay, I just want to make sure, like, are those your real thoughts? And try to probe them to give you their real thoughts. Um, yeah, the more that happens, and the more boom. So, yeah, makes so much sense. The overprotective mother FE analogy, love it. Hey, I'm glad. I've noticed FE users have a greater awareness of how they affect others than FI users. And FI users have a greater awareness of how others affect them than. That is spot on. That is so spot on. Like, my ISFP wife always is thinking and always knows how something affected her. And I'm like, how? How did you emotionally affected her, at least. But for me, it's like I'm just so focused on like how I emotionally affected other people. Um, and it's not, once again, to say that she's not aware of that, but she definitely is like more tuned in with like how something emotionally affected her. And yeah, um, yeah, just a great way. I'm not even going to drag that. That's great. Hey, Barb, was that your little cousin playing a toy just a moment ago? Nope, I'm in like this lobby area right now, and there was like this woman who walked past with her dogs. They were cute. You can probably actually hear one of them barking right now. So she walked that way, and then she ended up walking this way, and yeah. Hey, Jess. By the way, Jess, I like your comments on my videos. I'm gonna be responding to them. I'm like trying to like make way. I try to respond to comments like very thoughtfully. So it might take me a while, sometimes even like months before I respond to people's like comments. But I really try to get to like every comment, especially like the longer ones. It's like, okay, I have to sit down and make sure that I'm focused. But I'm like, if you took the time to write that, I definitely read every single one. And it's like, okay, I'm gonna bookmark that for myself to come back to. So yeah, I appreciate that. And speaking of appreciation, I appreciate all of y'all for tuning in. Seriously. Thank you for being interested in learning about this function. And I hope that it's been helpful. I hope that it's expanded your view that, once again, FE has, just like every function, has many different facets to it. It's an emerald, and it has all the different faces to it. And FE is not one of the faces. FE is the emerald itself. So next week, maybe, if everything goes well, we'll be talking about FI and all the different facets that come with that. And without further ado, whatever I do, thank y'all for tuning in. I appreciate y'all. Please like the video if you liked it. And don't be like that 666 guy who just disliked it because they wanted to be a jerk. All right. Y'all have a great rest of your evening.